Okay, I'm live now on YouTube. I got 50-50 comments on if the screen was sharing. I'm going to try again. Please let me know if you can see the odd screen. If this does not work, then I'm just going to go and you're going to have to stare at my face because I want to get this done. But right now I see no comments in the live chat. So if anybody, obviously right this minute, you should see my face. Right now you should see the odd screen, and now I'm going to go half and half. Okay, yeah, I mean, I'm doing the same thing I always do. Still just face. Okay. Let me try doing just the window. Did that do anything? Still no odd screen. I'm sorry to waste everybody's time. I'm trying very hard to make this work and I have no idea. Okay. Still not working. Please show odd screen. Yeah, I'm trying. Clearly, I need some help with this streaming thing. All right, everyone's saying to just talk and ignore this, but the screen is pretty important. There's a couple people who said it's working. I'm very confused why this would work for some people and not others. Can I put it on my phone and hold it up? I guess I could put this in selfie mode. This is really stupid. I could put this in selfie mode. This is going to be mirror image though, isn't it? Is this showing on screen? I don't know. This is insane. All right, people are saying to just go. I'm just going to go. I'm very sorry about this. I will try everything I can to not have this happen next time. I'm doing the same thing I've done every week since week 1, and this has worked perfectly every single time. I'll keep periodically trying to make it work. If somebody has any tips, that would help, but I'm trying to. Anyways, I don't know who needs to hear this, but I want to start this with, because I know there's probably lots of people who do. I understand these games are all really exciting. They all mean a lot. A lot of people are going to be watching them and think they're cool to watch and everything. And some people, that causes an impulse to want to bet more. And I just want to reiterate, if anybody watching this has the same motive as me, which is just purely to make more money, at least when betting a game, there's zero need to bet more on the game just because you can, or just because the game means more. And mathematically, you should just be looking for the biggest edges possible. And so I really wish I could share the screen right now to show like the gap in pricing and how it's even possible to find good numbers. But with these games starting in 24, 48, and 72 hours, you know, there's all kinds of ways to win. One basically undeniable way is to just get really good numbers that makes, you know, essentially if you get scalpable CLV at post, basically undebatable, you're going to win. That's going to be pretty hard for me to do right now. I lost, but we managed that with one of the Denver game last week. But we're not going to get in front of anything really big right now, in my opinion. If you're one of the 0.01% watching this video, you probably don't even need my opinion anyways, but where the only way to make a material change to your bankroll would be by max hammering one of these playoff games, go ahead. For everybody else, you know, I'm much more interested in looking for Tulane minus 15 when we know Jacob Zeno is out and it's going to close 19 and they win by 50. Those are the games I bet more on. Definitely not these where there's really no secrets and everyone knows everything. I'm going to talk about them and ways they could go, and I'll recap everything in a sec. But yeah, like these are all pretty tight. If you are going to bet them, I really believe the most important thing you could do is get a really good price. I can't promise that the site in the bio or description on this video is going to always forever get you the best price on every game. That's definitely not the case. However, for a vast majority of people watching this video, I do think having an option like Bet 105, which is the only sports book I've ever endorsed in any sort of situation like this, which you can find in my bio, will give you the best chance at overcoming how tight these lines are if you can just basically come close to devigging yourself on hunting the best line in the market. And they have exceptionally competitive prices on all 5 of these football games this week. There's 0 geo restrictions. I live in Costa Rica. I know not everybody can hunt out, Sport Trade or these other exchanges in the US right now. For anybody who's not in a state where they can access that, anybody who's even like remotely crypto competent can access this site and get, pinnacle quality of prices on these football games. I definitely think everybody watching this video would be best served to at least explore it and check it out. If you are interested, and you do, I would really appreciate it if you did so using the link that's in the description of this video. So yeah, obviously every week, for most people watching these, I know are new for last week and this week, but every week I kind of do a recap. Obviously the one real main opinion, Ohio State won. Would I rebet that, and was that good? I don't know. Obviously it closed bad. I would understand anybody who said it's a 7-point game with 2 minutes left with first and goal on the 1. That game's like pick or random. That's not really how football works, in my opinion. Look, I'm relatively set. I mean, it's January 17th. Like, we all fucking know what these power ratings are, but basically within a point or two. There's a couple I have like a little bit of an opinion on, but we're not really like holding any secrets on like goodness of teams. And I mean, I think we're seeing it even in the price with this Notre Dame game right now. Like, I don't really think I was way off or am off on what I think Ohio State is. Like, most people have had what that roster is as like in the low plus 30s. Like, that's pretty easy what they are. We can debate all kinds of handicaps on like styles of games and what the number might play to against different opponents, which I'll do with this Notre Dame game in a minute, but I'm pretty set on that. Frankly, I think more of the advantage last week, if it even was one, I could easily be convinced it wasn't one, was probably being a little bit lower on Texas. And I don't really see a need to update my Texas number either. So yeah, I had moderate conviction that game could be 7. Fully understand anybody who thinks Texas is the right side. As much as that end game played out crazy, it was like a hot knife through butter until like a pretty crazy 15-yard Henderson penalty in the first half. Ohio State's very much built as a front runner right now. This game could be played 1,000 times and look wildly different, all 1,000. I think I'll say I would still make it 7 with 10% of the conviction and not bet it if that game were replayed, and would wait to see it play out. Fully understand why people would think I'm an idiot and just got lucky with Ohio State, but I'm pretty convicted on what the numbers on these teams are. I'll recap all the rest as we get through it. I guess to go quickly, I was hoping we'd be able to lay 2.5 flat with the Chargers. Luckily, that never came up. What did I and the market get wrong there? Honestly, I don't think a ton with team quality. Again, it sounds crazy for a game that landed 20 points off what it was priced, or 22.5 points off what it was priced, to say it was well priced. I'm just checking the comments on the hot screen. I'm going to try one more time to get the screen share to work. This is really insane that this doesn't work. But, it's 6-0 with the most insane fumble play in their own end zone that, the ball literally is an oval, could just as easily bounce 5 yards to the side and become a defensive touchdown for the Chargers. I don't think anybody watching this thinks a 13-0 Chargers game state doesn't funnel pretty strongly in their favor, the way, everyone that's shelling out and destroying Herbert the last week is basically tweeting the exact same things about Stroud for the last 2 months in the first 27 minutes of that game. And then, not to be a Herbert defender, but truly the first pick, no good, absolutely zero defense for that. But the pick 6, which more or less like completely garbled the game state and ruined everything, not a good throw, absolutely not a good throw, but it's probably 6 inches high, maybe 9 or 10 inches high. It hit both of McConkey's hands and just threw it too hard through them. I mean, turn that even into an incompletion, let alone a completion, it probably should be. I think the game looks wildly differently. And then the third interception hit Disley in both hands straight right away. And the fourth is just a wild game state. You're down 20. You have to make shit happen and push it up, I'd be more concerned if he was just holding on the ball and just eating the L. So like contextualizing that, I still have to leave Chargers above average. It's one football game. It's 60 minutes. I mean, you might get like 10 non-garbage time possessions in these games. There's just so much you could learn from these games. I would call that much more of a localized handicap on the game. I probably could have thought more of, which is Houston did do something they haven't really done a lot all year, which I was impressed with, which is a lot of stunts in games to get Hunter and Anderson on by far the weakness of the entire Chargers roster, which is guard through center. I probably incorrectly thought that Trey Pipkins III didn't matter last week because salary was so good in the New England game. He was horrendous, like utterly horrendous in the Houston game and got abused by all these guys and Danico Autry. That was probably a bigger deal than I thought. And we hadn't really seen him handle speed like that at an NFL level in a while. So I guess I could have thought through that more to like Houston, but ultimately I don't think I would actually do a ton. And I don't think it'd be priced like crazily different this week. I liked an off-market number on Denver team total over that obviously they scored in the first like 150 seconds and then didn't score another point. I mean, it got scalpable CLV. Obviously, everybody here watching knows I care way more about winning money than getting good numbers, but the 210 to the line, and I'm never going to really apologize for getting scalpable CLV. Another probably localized handicap thing I could have thought through. To be honest, it was hard to see Peyton, I thought, coaching that game so poorly with game state. And then the other real opinion was an easy winner on Green Bay team total under. Honestly, if I have a regret from the week, it was probably not liking Philly and under more just in the game as regular bets and having more conviction in that. You guys could probably hear me talk about the Philadelphia defense. We'll talk about them again this week. They're very outlier, difficult to price right now with what to do with them. Yeah, I mean, we'll end up talking about every game this week. I'm going to have my odds screen up and try one more time. I don't think this is going to work. I have no idea how to fix this. Maybe I need to try some new Chrome plugin or something. I don't know. I'm actually going to start with college. So I talked about Ohio State already. Just on goodness of teams, I'm going to maintain them as something around a plus 32. I could be stubborn, but I know what we've seen from their good. I mean, 34-0 on Oregon in the first half can't just be like, oh, Oregon had a bad day on the Rose Bowl. Like, I'm pretty sure the roster is exceedingly better than all the rest. Notre Dame, I was keeping in the very high teens at the start of the year, especially after the NIU game. Game by game, they've creeped up to be, for me, I'm pricing them around a 23. I mean, the gap is 9-ish if this is a normal game. I'll fix and contextualize everything for the total in a bit. But, to be really real, and, all they can do is kill the teams they've played. But since the NIU game, which is horrendous, they've kicked the living shit out of Purdue, who's probably the worst Power 4 team I've ever seen. Them in 2022 Colorado. Maybe, I think 2019 might have been Rutgers. There's a really bad team in 2019 too. Beat Miami, Ohio solidly, who always throws these non-conference games and did again this year. Landed 7 against Louisville, which is where the game closed, who had 2 of their best receivers out that game. Louisville had a disappointing year all year. Then they played the basically a homeless man's Tebow in Stanford game where they got Justin Lamson. That was really high conviction side for me. That kid cannot play. They played Georgia Tech without Haynes King the next week, and this was before they started doing like the Zach Pyron like combo with King, and they were playing I think Gibson's his name. Means next to nothing to me. I'm not saying the Navy and Army games mean nothing, but those games do funnel so strangely when the talent gap in rosters is more than 10 points. It's just they can't play left-handed or from behind, and those games just funneled in the ways they did. I'm not saying don't give credit, but like just all these games, we haven't really seen a competent team. Florida State was the most pathetic. I mean, if it wasn't Purdue, it was Florida State, probably the second most pathetic Power 4 team. Then Virginia was alternating quarterbacks the entire team. The entire game. Couldn't even cover. I know it was a concession at the end, but like still. And SC probably weren't the right side against Mayava, who's also a backup. So it's like 4 or 5 backup quarterbacks in Louisville, basically, that they've beaten since losing to NIU. I'm not saying none of it matters, but if you just look at like gaps in EPA per play and success rate and all like these metrics that are going to show up, it's hard to, and I get it. Ohio State's played teams they're way better than two. Like there's a big gap in talent in a lot of college football games. You can do this with most college football teams, but Notre Dame really has specifically not just the teams they've played, but like Tech without Haynes King and Stanford without Ashton Daniels and Florida State alternating the quarterbacks and definitely no DJU. Not that he's good, but like this Cromanuk can't play whatsoever. You know, SC without Moss, which I thought was a downgrade. It was kind of like a political thing for the portal and everything. You know, it's been especially good scheduling. Now, these playoff games have meant a lot to me and really helped me maintain Notre Dame up to a 23 where I feel decent about keeping them there. And I will say they probably are a better team than roster. I said this about Washington last week. Like, you can roll your eyes and call me an idiot if you want. Like, it is pretty clear they love each other and play together as a team and are like a real unit. I think there is some 1 + 1 = 3 happening from that. How much we'll see. On numbers, shocker, I don't see like a cent of edge on this game whatsoever. On handicap, I understand why people love Ohio State's matchup. If you don't know, Notre Dame's played by far more man coverage than every single team in the country. Very few teams have even attempted that against Ohio State. Obviously, of the 15 games they've played this year, basically none have the personnel to even consider that being a good decision. Notre Dame might. That's the thing why I brought up all these backup quarterbacks in these game states is because like even Georgia, they got the backup quarterback. Like this guy, Benjamin Morrison being hurt and out for the year really was supposed to matter. We see Cam Hart in the NFL playing at such a high level right now. Like there were some questions about these corners in the preseason. They've played a bunch of completely unserious, uncompetitive passing games this year. Even Penn State, like they don't have really Big Ten level receivers right now, as evidenced by 0 receptions for negative 3 yards last week. We haven't seen them expose that. Now, I was watching Marcus Freeman this week, like 3 or 4 days ago. He did say, obviously everyone can see the numbers of the small mouth plays where people have been dumb enough to run man coverage against Ohio State. They've shredded it. Very unsurprising. That also like particularly suits the way Bill Howard kind of, you can see how he reads defenses and everything. He's very aware of that. I would expect they do something kind of hybrid mixy like they did last week or last season in the regular season game. If you missed it, Ohio State won, I think 17-14 in South Bend. The game was 3.5. It landed 3. They had a very good plan, really took a lot of Marvin Harrison away. Can they do that again with Jaren Rice? To me, Texas was able to do that by being extreme drop zone and clouding everything over Smith, which is not something I would like really be expecting from Notre Dame. We'll see. The logical thing for Notre Dame to do, just because it's smart and rational doesn't mean they'll do it, but would be to very early on completely invite run, probably not stack the box, probably not let Ohio State get out to some crazy lead, keep it competitive, hope to play red zone roulette. Do they have the bodies to pull that off? Probably. I mean, these are higher level defensive backs than what they saw with Tennessee or Oregon. Ohio State, what they saw, what they're going to see in Notre Dame this week. Sorry if that confused anyone. I could be convinced either way. I would call last week a complete and utter disaster from Chip Kelly to not have foreseen anything whatsoever of how people are going to clearly take Smith out of the game after the Rose Bowl and not have anything designed to exploit that. I would really hope and pray that with all these NFL players everywhere on the team, they'd be able to find something out where if Notre Dame does employ some type of similar strategy, they'd be having some type of counterpunch to use that to their advantage to clear out sides of the field that they clearly didn't in the game last week. I have serious doubts Notre Dame can play from behind, that this could funnel in a direction where they can't score twice. And all Ohio State needs to do is basically get to like the mid-20s and it's a solid cover. I don't really see any touchdown scoring playmakers on Notre Dame whatsoever, and they're playing the best, pretty clearly best defense in college football, who specifically doesn't let you run on them. If you missed it, the left tackle for Notre Dame is out, Anthony Knapp. The right guard, Rocco Spindler, also came out. He was replaced with this guy named Jagasaw. The guy who replaced the left tackle got completely and utterly abused. It wasn't actually even Abdul Carter. It was some Abdul Carter, but it wasn't always He was horrible against everybody the whole game. The guy who came in played really well, Jagasaw at right guard. Now that's a totally different position from left tackle. This guy, Jagasaw, was supposed to start the season at left tackle and tore his pec and is somehow playing in the same season like this Redskins guy. My current assumption is the right guard is going to play. That's Freeman was kind of answering questions that way that it was sounding more promising. And just based on that game, I would expect they would go with Jagasaw just because it can't be any worse than the left tackle they had in the Orange Bowl. We'll see early on. If they use the same idiot from the Orange Bowl at left tackle, going against Sawyer and JTT, I'm quite lost as to how Notre Dame's going to score more than 17.5 points. And so my best guess on gap and team quality, funnels, matchups, everything would be I'd probably prefer 9 or 9.5 to 8. I wish I could have my screen up right now to show everything. If you're laying 8 minus, if I'm right, which is a big if, and the game should be 9.5, just because people don't always do the math on this. If you're laying -8, -110 when it should be 9.5, that's something like a 5 or 6 cent edge. Like that's not something I would ever in a million years consider recommending others to bet or something that's going to have market influence in the Telegram or anything. And really not even anything I would be betting myself unless it was like really obvious there's some information where it could be like higher. And to be clear, I kind of think 9.5 is right. I really wouldn't be shocked if 7 is right. And I have very low conviction in this. If you need to bet something, obviously I know this whole week is kind of like a bookmaker's holiday, as you can see for me looking at these numbers, all of these kind of look like bookmakers' delights. If you're going to bet something, again, I wish I had the odd screen working right now. There's a lot of 17.5 -115 for Notre Dame team total under of like semi-available, like normal-ish markets on the game. That would be by far my favorite. I do think that's plus EV. I do think that should be in the -120s. I think there's a pretty. I don't bet these for a living. I don't do the math on all these ever. If you do, you can check these out. I would assume if the correlations between Ohio State first half and game, and maybe even Ohio State first half and second half, and obviously game, with some correlation of those, I think there's a decent chance that if this game is more than a score lead at halftime, that it does funnel out of hand. I don't have great conviction that it will be uncompetitive in the first half. Like there's totally a route towards Notre Dame playing hard. I think this defensive lineman for them being out matters. There's one, and then the other matchup thing that's like really no good for Notre Dame is like specifically the strength of Ohio State's defense. Like the one weakness, especially after this Texas game, is Denzel Burke. This isn't on Spank odds. I don't know why. Denzel Burke got hurt in the Cotton Bowl and left the game. This guy, Jermaine Matthews, came in. He played pretty good, to be honest. But like, if there was going to be a weak link on Ohio State's really entire team, other than interior offensive line, it would be that. They don't have any receiving or passing game quarterback at all to exploit that. And then, like I said, maybe one weakness on Ohio State's offense would be left guard through right guard. With Riley Mills out and Howard Cross clearly not 100% on the ankle, I don't really think Notre Dame exploits that either. Like Penn State actually really ran the ball very effectively, like a 62% success rate or something on rushing, like 0.2 EPA per play on rushing. It looked quite easy in the first half to me for Penn State, and then just a complete coaching debacle and blow up in the second half. Ohio State's liable to do the same. I'm not in love with that staff, but the matchup's not good for Notre Dame. And then I will say, so look, I don't, maybe I'm insulting people's intelligence or underrating the chat of people watching this video. I assume there's going to be some strong impulse from a lot of people who watch football this week to have some variation of a pick 2 or 3 or all 4 of these favorites parlayed together in money lines with the Chiefs, the Lions, Ohio State, and Eagles. I'll talk through the math on why I probably don't think that's a good decision and how, if you're dying to do this, how I would look for prices to bet on these things. Again, I really wish the screen sharing would work. I'm going to try it right now for the Kansas City game. The YouTube studio keeps saying it's sharing my screen. It's Clearly not. All right, whatever. So Kansas City is one of the weirdest teams to price. To be honest, I usually really like to price them kind of like a baseball team. I view them very money line oriented, just knowing the way they coach and manage these. Mahomes has played 112 regular season NFL games now and 18 playoff games. He's 89-23 in the regular season. That's a 795 win percentage. He's 15-3 in the playoffs. I know they've ran fairly good in some of the 15, but like in 2 of the 3, they've arguably run poorly. Like the 2019 overtime loss to the Patriots is running pretty bad, in my opinion, with the offsides from D Ford. And then the 2021 season, 2022 game in the AFC title game against Cincinnati was also pretty crazy. So he's lost 3 playoff games in his life. 15-3 is an 833 win percentage. I mean, just ignoring empiricism and data, just intuitively and logically and axiomatically and watching them play, like it makes sense to call the Chiefs as long as these players are playing. I'll get into some of the injuries that I think help them this week. Something like an 800 team. I mean, again, he's above that in his career and above that in playoff games, which I get. A lot of the playoff games are at home. They're also against playoff teams. Like 15-3 is pretty psychotic. And pricing this game like a baseball money line, if you do nothing exotic for like extra home field for the bye week, nothing for matchups, just price this as an 800 team against a 500 team with normal home field, nothing extra for Arrowhead, this game should be 635. So I laid 2.5 and 3 in this game that was played less than a month ago. I'm pretty physically incapable of laying 500 when I just effectively laid like 165, like literally 4 weeks ago with the same teams. I do think the gap in pricing is just like at least justified. I'll go into like how I might play anything related to this game in a second. First off, that game didn't close good. Very strongly convicted in that. The way Houston plays defensively is, and not to like just glaze this guy all stream or anything, but like he really did change the NFL a little bit, like Steph Curry and everything, with how these teams all started playing these coverage shells back from his crazy 2018 year. That started basically a complete defensive revolution of not playing anything like the cover 3 or man schemes they were playing back in that era, that this guy completely shredded and made irrelevant. Houston is like basically the lone team still doing stuff like that, and Detroit to an extent. I think that's pretty disastrous against Andy Reid, even with these really, really, really elite corners. And we saw in that game where I don't think they could have scored much less than the 27 that they did. As for Houston, Tank Dell was by far the best player on the field for them that day. Obviously horrible what happened. I think he matters a lot, like a pretty decent amount. The other thing is he was exploiting what at that time was the one main weakness of Kansas City, which was the second corner behind McDuffie. I'm not expecting Jalen Watson to play all the snaps whatsoever. It's technically not even 100% that he's playing yet. Based on Andy Reid's pressers and everything, he seems likelier than not to play something this week. You can bet everything he owns, he won't play 100 snaps. But just playing something with a little bit of improvement from the corner who was getting abused, I think really does elevate this team. And so if you say that game closed like 3 juice, I think it closed wrong. I think 3.5 juice was, with those players on the field that day, a much better close. That 3.5 juice seriously turns in to probably 5.5 juice with just a bye week. Just no Tank Dell really truly does probably take it to 6.5 flat. And now Watson playing probably gets us to 7. And then, sorry to keep piling these layers on, but I do think this gap is justified because the extra playoff gear of Kansas City that I don't think is priced in, where Tiger Woods in his prime, very obviously zero speculation, always talked about how there's only 4 weeks a year that matter. I think it's very much the same thing with Kansas City right now. We'll talk about Buffalo, that I'm seeing a little with them on the same topic. I think that can take this to like 7.5 juice. Now, I mean, there's like a lot of 9 out there, 8.5 and 9. As the biggest like Houston hater in the market, with this total, that's kind of hard for me to support. But like, I'm not really considering Houston, and I just walked you through the math on the money line. Like I feel like I'm stretching things with Houston to call them a 500 team. Again, I know they just had an impressive 20-point playoff win. I'm expecting all the, you can't see my screen. I'm expecting Mixon and Alshire for sure to play. Woods sounds like he's in legitimate question. He's obviously no good, but if Diggs, Dell, Woods are all out, and it's like Mechie and Hutchinson, and they can't even pretend to want to run 4 and 5 wide receiver sets, like they're pretty hamstrung if McDuffie can just take away Collins, which he likely can, a lot like the first game. I think this rates to be pretty disastrous for Houston's offense. Now, obviously, it's priced in the totals 41. The one very big point on this game, I've probably just regurgitated a lot of stuff everybody's heard from the same 15 podcasts every week on these football games. The one thing I haven't heard anybody mention that I think is a massive deal. One of Kansas City's biggest hacks and why they've been an 800 team for the last half decade, I strongly believe this, is they hold on every play on offense. I'm not being like a Chiefs hater or bitching about officiating or anything. It's just they do. I think it's really smart. A, very few refs are going to call that all game. B, you might get away with it anyways. And C, 1st and 20 is a lot better than 2nd and 19 when you actually need to do it. The issue, I forget the ref's name. I don't have them all memorized, but the main ref for this Kansas City game called the second most holdings of the entire NFL this year. And in looking more into it, it doesn't seem random whatsoever that this is a high holding call officiating crew. That's enough for me to not like be laying these ridiculous like 500 prices on Kansas City. I'll get into like futures pricing in a second. That does probably, this is not even plus EV or an edge anywhere I see on the market right now. Like the best price I see right now for under would be Sport Trade as 4.5 even. But I do think 41 is a better total than 41.5. Given the way Kansas City coaches and manages these games, given what I believe was very strongly the right side, the way the Houston game played out last week and how both of these coaches frankly manage offense. Now, Stroud probably does rate to attempt a lot of passes, but which is not ideal for betting under 41.5 in a 2024, 2025 NFL game. But that would, if you need some, I haven't bet this. I don't even really think it's that good, but I do think that angle is strong because I am a fairly strong believer that the holding on every play is meaningful to Kansas City's success. I haven't heard anything about if Thuney's going to stay at left tackle and they keep Caliendo at guard or move him back and use Humphreys. I don't know what they're doing. I'm basically just going to defer and trust that they're doing the right thing. For people who are interested in all these moneyline parlays and stuff, like just in getting into the math of everything, I rarely do these. I know most people are new for these streams these last 2 weeks, but for everybody who's been on these all year, you heard me obviously only talk about one all year, which was the Week 18 Bengals, Ravens, Chargers one, because it's obviously correlated where if the first two win, where I was on market and didn't really have an opinion, as long as you're getting like competent pricing on those, the Chargers price rated to close so much better, which it did, laying something in like the 200 range that closed at 300. That makes sense. On these other games, sure, if you have an edge on every single piece of it, can you potentially even be magnifying your edge with these? Absolutely. Do I ever do them? No. It's not great for controlling your bankroll growth and sizing things appropriately for what the edges are. The one advantage could be, again, it'd be really helpful if I could share my screen right now. I'm very sorry, I can't figure this out. But I'm not saying this is the case, but if you thought maybe you could get some like 5% edge on Kansas City, a negative 1% edge on Detroit, and a 5% edge on Philly by parlaying the three, then that would overcome what would be a good, bad, and good bet into making one in totality good bet. However, unless there's an obvious correlation, I really wouldn't be looking to be playing any of these unless it's some like golden account that you're trying to make like look degenerate by betting these favorites. Again, I talked through how some of these might be cheap. For Chiefs playoff stuff, and maybe this will be even more helpful talking about next week's pricing, because again, on Friday, I'm not going to really have anybody, myself included, stealing on any of these games. I think based on what Baltimore is this week, and they even just got bet some more before this call, I think that price would be similar. Like, again, they would have been coming off just beating Buffalo in Buffalo. I think that price would be pretty similar in Arrowhead, around Baltimore 1.5. I don't think I agree with that price. I think I'd prefer Kansas City 1.5, depending on injuries that happen in both of those games. But just being aware of that, like, there's a solid chance that I'm hunting out the best money line right now. Like, well, the best price is Matchbook on the Chiefs right now at 425, but like War has 445. Like, if you somehow got something in the mid or high 400s in Kansas City this week, you'd probably come a little close. I'll do the parlay math right now on if you want to bet Chiefs Super Bowl or anything like this, should you roll over or not? Let's say you get 480 this week. Let's say you get plus $1.05. If it's Baltimore next week, I'll do it for Buffalo in a second. And then let's say Detroit or Philly would have just beaten the other. I still think Kansas City's laying something, so call it like $1.20 that you'd average there. You're getting around 354. So that's where most of the prices are. Now, if it's Buffalo in the next round, I mean, they're very likely going to be laying something, in my opinion. Call it $1.15. That changes the parlay math to be like you're taking 314. There's a mostly plus 350 on Chiefs Super Bowl out there. I think when you split the middle on those, it's a rare situation where that futures price actually probably is a fair deal. The issue is, for what I'm assuming the majority of people watching this, is there could be some very good Bitcoin trades in the next 3 weeks with the Trump inauguration. It sounds crazy for a 3-week post up, but you might be a lot more capital efficient trading Bitcoin for the next 3 weeks for the 20-cent gap in futures pricing on moneyline rollovers. So yeah, ultimately nothing, but I do think that ref matters. Washington, Detroit on team quality, I could never really stretch it this high. Again, back on the Bitcoin topic, I think the majority of people watching this would know by now, like, Bitcoin is the risk-free rate. Measuring anything against Bitcoin is going to be tremendously difficult to see anything that's better than a risk-free 60% a year. And so when you risk adjust everything against Bitcoin, I don't really see the point of holding things. The reason I bring that up, betting the Detroit Lions every week is kind of becoming the risk-free rate of football betting. Like, these guys just crush every single year. All you have to do is bet on Dan Campbell in every game, every single year. It's like, I cannot believe how easy this is and how little I've capitalized on it. I think there is an element of that, of them just trying obscenely hard in every game that not every team does in the regular season, that might go away in the playoffs. This is a lot less common in football, but this used to happen, at least when I was paying attention to the NBA a lot, is there was a playoff penalty for some of these awesome regular season teams who, not because necessarily they were tired, though that was sometimes part of it, but who really were winning and inflating their record so hard by trying throughout the year, which sounds like a ridiculous thing to treat as a novelty, but not every team does. And Detroit just clearly tries harder than everybody in the regular season. That gap means probably a lot less in the playoffs when everybody's obviously all coming with their fastball. But I do still think there's some material element of just the way they play and score a shitload of touchdowns to them extending leads, and especially the way they go for it. That said, I really can't make them too much more than a +6. And as bad as a lot of Washington's roster is, I walked through why I think they're a +1 last week. I still kind of think that's what they are. Make the gap 5-ish on a neutral, make playoff by home field north of 3.5 points. I'd still be closer to 8 than like the 9 and 9.5s out there. Now, if you want to add in like the Detroit covers every game, never bet against this team thing, I get it. But like, and the Thanksgiving game against the dog shit Bears, they're basically the same price. That's going to be really hard for me to justify, even being the biggest Detroit supporter in the world and the biggest fan of basically their entire roster and coaching staff. To support this price, I get it. I can easily be not interested in Washington. But to actually lay this, meaning you need to make it realistically more than 10 with conviction to like really think you have a bet here, especially with the money line and all these parlays. That just seems like such a massive stretch with the level of quarterback that Washington, like they very arguably have the better quarterback in the game. I don't even think it is arguable. They have the better quarterback in the game. And so that's basically enough for me to do nothing because I'm not really going to make it 7. And there's way better things to do with your money than bet against Detroit, in my opinion, ever. I think Lattimore looked utterly horrendous last week, as we kind of talked about in this call. I'm going to kind of cautiously assume that continues until I have a reason to believe it wouldn't. There's really not a lot of meaningful injuries here. Everybody's probably going to shove down your throat all this man cover stuff. These are NFL teams. The reason I bring it up with Notre Dame is because these guys all recruit to a certain thing. It's really hard to teach 20-year-olds how to play a new defensive scheme overnight with 1 week of practice. There's a lot less fluidity, in my opinion. When you have all these podcasts in the world who all know about all this man cover splits for all these quarterbacks and all these teams, yes, is there an element of that's Detroit's identity? Do I expect a lot of it? Absolutely. Same thing with Washington. But there's a reason that's their identities, and people are mixing in all kinds of stuff. It's really not properly contextualizing how bad some of the man they saw during the season was and what they're going to see this week. I'm not saying ignore it. I'm just saying if 15,000 podcasts during the week are all talking about it, I think that's going to be pretty well accounted for in all the numbers. Again, just like the Washington game last week, all the mouth breathers who don't do math are going to love over here. All the math nerds who don't know football are going to love under. Again, like last week, I fall basically thinking it's fairly well priced, this total. I haven't done a thing. I don't really see the point. Philly, everybody's freaking out about Hurts on the offense. I mean, every drive where the lead did get cut to one possession, they scored right away on the next drive. For people who like haven't watched this guy as closely as I have since 2016, I mean, again, you guys can probably, maybe there's some bias. I don't know. I try very hard to like be super aware of all possible biases I could have, but he's just one of, if not the biggest money makers of my life. This is how he quarterbacks and manages games. And I need somebody to find somebody who's won a higher percentage of football games, pro and college, since he started playing in 2016, because I'm not aware of them existing. I wouldn't freak out too much about that. I think what the game called for and required last week is what they gave. I'm very confidently holding Philly right around a 5.5 plus, maybe a 6. It's hard to see a game as dominant as what the Rams played last week and not upgrade them. But my strongest intuition is sort of leaning towards not upgrading them. I mean, these are January NFL games. Like, they're very likely going to mostly be closing good most of the time. Clearly that they didn't look like they should be dogs, obviously, the way the game played out, but it could be played 1,000 different times and look pretty different in some of them. I think there's some very serious issues with Minnesota's offense that weren't really exposed from a pretty scammy schedule. Again, I'm not trying to like diminish what the Rams did, because that was obviously mathematically dominant at every level. But I'm scared to all of a sudden start blasting them above kind of the 1.5 they've looked like for mostly the whole year. So I would definitely not be able to make this less than 4 on neutral. I mean, Philly was 3 on the road in the regular season and killed them. 3.5 or 4 looked like a way better number for that game. And so flipping home, where Philly's going to be freezing, probably snowing, and higher for the playoffs, leaves me making it probably fractionally higher than 6. Now, it's shaded there. Like 6 is Chris juice, or Chris is 6 juice right now. Basically, Ever Sharp is 6 juice right now. If you could get her, like, what's the best price right now? 608 at Sport Trade. I can't really make it more than 115, but maybe you would have a 7-cent edge at Sport Trade. I think there's way better games to bet. I lean Philly. I think a lot of the Rams defense, people all of a sudden falling in love with them, had a lot to do with the offensive line they just played. The team as a whole really looked horrendous from the Buffalo game up until last week. Like, truly horrendous. Like that Arizona game at home in a must-win game against the Arizona team I have little to no respect for was really kind of pathetic, honestly. Jets game was honestly really pretty poor against a completely dead San Francisco team. That game was no good. I mean, these are not good football games. I don't hate the Rams' defensive personnel, but I do think they're like a little bit of front runners. I do think by far the weakest link is these corners. Witherspoon looks likely to play. I think there's a high chance Philly could be able to exploit that if needed. There's just a chance that won't be needed. I mean, there's no offensive line remotely as big and physical as Philly that Rams have seen anything like since frankly they played Philly. And I just brought up the Buffalo game. Like that'd be another similar offensive line comparison, and we saw what good offensive lines can do against them. So I believe there's a really strong S curve with the Rams defense against good and bad offensive lines. I think they can make bad offensive lines look extra bad. I think there's a high chance the Rams defense can be made to look mediocre or worse against elite offensive lines like Philly. So I see the funneling there. Obviously, I'm tremendously fond of Philadelphia's defense. I guess if you need something on any of these games, I would be looking at Rams under 19.5 in like the -115 range. Pinnacle is -112. I sort of think that should be in the 120s. Definitely you're not stealing. This total even just came down before this call. As at 44, you can maybe pretend to like under by 2 cents, but 43.5 is pretty perfect, I think. As for the snow, like, yeah, that should matter a little. The other thing, the Rams rely a decent amount on pre-snap stuff. Honestly, more than a decent amount. They rely a lot on pre-snap motions and everything. I could be convinced that there's a bigger than normal road field disadvantage. I don't really want to stretch anything here. If you're stretching it, you're making it like 6 juice, and maybe like 6 reduced juice might be some micro bet. I haven't bet anything. I don't really love it or recommend it. And then Baltimore, the main game everybody's going to like. So yeah, but I mean, Baltimore, they have played a bunch of bullshit lately. Like they played the Steelers twice, Bailey Zappi, and the Giants, I think, are their last like 4 or 5 games. And got really thoroughly well controlled by Philly before that. Like that final score was misleading. Like Philly was by far the right side of that game. I cautiously still don't think this is close to what the +8 Baltimore was of last year, especially without Flowers, who, by the way, like I think it's a foregone conclusion, but like the way Lamar was talking in the press conference this week makes me nearly certain Flowers is out. I think everybody's operating with the same information, but the way these markets work, they really do like certainty. And sometimes when these are announced, there is movement. I would call Flowers exceedingly doubtful. Without him, I'd maybe a 7.25, but I don't all of a sudden want to start like boosting them. Honestly, I really do think they tried in that second half last week. Like I think that was kind of a bad second half from them. I don't think that was them like looking to this game. That might have been, could easily be wrong. It's hard for an NFL team to be a lot more than that. I'm going to keep Buffalo stretched up around a 6 where I had them. From my perspective, look, it's tough. They basically clinched the 2 seed. I know not technically, but like more or less with that San Francisco game when they won the division in the snow in like November. They were kind of done. I mean, it was going to take a lot to overcome Kansas City. Not impossible, but like we saw them the next week come with 0 defensive intensity against the Rams. I liked over in that game because of it. I think there's some chance that me starting to doubt this defensive personnel for Buffalo had a lot to do with them just basically not coming with their fastball since November. Because there's no defensive coach in football I like more than McDermott. I know he gets a lot of shit for game management and stuff. It's probably fair. But in terms of like defensively scheming stuff, I love him. Now, like you've probably heard in all 17 podcasts about all these games this week, it is an objectively abhorrent matchup for Buffalo with how much they stay in nickel, how little they're suited for this extremely heavy Patrick Ricard personnel with Baltimore. And I think that played into what we saw in the regular season this week. Again, like the 17 podcast probably told you, Teron Johnson didn't play, Terrell Bernard didn't play. They were missing a lot. Taylor Rapp got hurt in the game. Milano obviously didn't play. Shakir got hurt in that game. It was a disaster nightmare run out for Buffalo in that game. On team quality, I call this more like Baltimore 1.5-ish on a neutral, meaning I'm a lot closer to like Buffalo half with this home, which I do think matters a lot. As again, you've probably heard on every podcast, this is going to be the coldest game of Lamar Jackson's career. Buffalo, like I've said every week, does a shitload of the pre-snap motion. They get in the perfect play a lot. One big thing, you probably saw Baltimore start doing the tush push with Mark Andrews. Obviously, Buffalo is just as good as Philly. Both of these teams I would expect to more or less be automatic in short down and distances. Of course, there's some probability they fail, but I rate both of these right there on the level of Philly with converting these. There's a chance of this being probably a lower possession game than this total would imply. Why I haven't bet under is probably a reasonable expectation from the market that a lot of these drives, despite it being low in volume, do convert into touchdowns with the just obscene level of quarterback play from both of these. And probably why the market has ended up favoring Baltimore is me not having a good sense of how much math to apply to what is objectively a really good scenario for Baltimore's offense here. Just in terms of like schematically the way Buffalo plays. Now, they're not idiots. Maybe they will. I would doubt if for 8 quarters in a row, what they just saw not work with the backups in, I think, week 4 they played. Maybe they'll try that again, hoping that Milano, Bernard, and Teron Johnson make the difference. If it's clearly not after a half, it'd be relatively shocking if they don't just eventually start committing bodies to the box. They do. I mean, it's an NFL roster. They obviously have big human beings to play. It's not like they're incapable of playing that way. But yeah, that would probably make me think the Flowers injury could matter less. And while my intuition on numbers makes it more like a lean on Buffalo, I sort of completely understand why the markets ended up moving Baltimore's way, even without Flowers. So yeah, I guess if you need something like on numbers, I barely lean under in Buffalo, but that, like I just said, that's almost certainly because I'm not enough of a ball knower to know what to do with the contextualizing what's an obvious advantage for Baltimore in matchups. So yeah, basically nothing. If you need one thing, it would be Notre Dame under 17.5 minus $1.15. That's basically gone now. Paradise has it. I mean, I guess 41.5 even maybe might be good for under in the Kansas City game. When I say that, like maybe it should be 05. Like maybe you have a 5-cent edge there. And then for the parlays, like I don't think it, like I'll go through, like you guys can just tell me what you guys can make your own decisions. Like I'll just tell you what it would be. Again, doing nothing for bye weeks that obviously I think favor Kansas City. I mean, let's stretch Houston up to a 5-10 team. That feels so wrong to me. So wrong. But if you keep Kansas City as an 800 team, again, no bye week, that's still making this game 600. Like, I think there's a real chance if you hunt a good number on Kansas City money line, even with the ref stuff I just mentioned, and even with me, frankly, like against the number league, there's a lot of people who say I'm completely delusional and don't understand math whatsoever to lean Houston spread and Kansas City money line. I'm not saying I actually think that. The VIG's too much on both of these to actually have that as a legitimate opinion. But I still believe the gap is not like completely perfectly nailed in by the market right now and how these guys manage these. So I don't know what my point is. I guess if you can get like, if you need to make your account look good, then maybe my favorite of these would be more like Kansas City and Ohio State for one of these parlays. If you're hunting out like really good numbers, where I think there's a fairly strong chance of maybe having 1 or 2% edges on each of those. But again, like I said at the start of this call, there's no sense to unload on any of these. Anybody saying like their game of the years, any of these games, I know this is like a big business for touts and everything to love these games as they're like 3-star lock of the year. I think you're completely nuts to love any of the games. It's possible. Like I really like Kansas City against Miami in the playoffs last year. If there's one of these quarterbacks that really plays to a different number, I get it. But we're left with these 8 quarterbacks right now. Like there's nobody like that. I don't see how anybody could really be stealing on these. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. I'm gonna check the comments, and again, I'm sorry The screen sharing hasn't worked. Hopefully this wasn't a complete disaster. I'll try one more time. Long teasers priced $120 have to be good for a small edge. I don't focus on any of those, to be honest. Might be like a dinosaur grandpa, but I just basically have the odds screen where you bet sides and totals on real stuff. That's really all I focus on. Stuff that you can bet real stuff on. Look ahead is KC minus 1.5 even versus Baltimore. I would question where. That's what I would make it. So that's not an offensive price. Baltimore got bet last week. They're getting bet this week. Maybe. Again, that's where I would make it. I hope it's wrong. I would probably like to bet Kansas City as small dog price next week. Auto fade the Magic. Oh yeah. People are talking about the NBA angle with like teams who try. It's not even like a penalty. It's just like a inflation in price due to something that won't be an advantage in the playoffs, which is a gap in effort. Yeah. Anyways, sorry I missed all these comments. Sorry again. There's a comment about selling my Bitcoin for whiff. I don't plan to do that. Yeah. Sorry again about the odd screen. Again, I really hope I'm wrong. I'll do one of these next week. I'll do one for the Super Bowl, and hopefully there's going to be stuff to bet. But don't be shocked if there's nothing. Again, it's January 17th. Everybody kind of knows what all these teams are. Even if they didn't, they have 27 podcasts obsessing on every little detail. Other than that Chiefs ref angle, watch that. I believe that the Chiefs will get called for holding penalties, and I believe they could be impactful to the game. Maybe more to the total. But yeah, not a lot is going to slip through the cracks in these games. So thanks for listening this long. Hope everybody has a great day, and I will see you all next week.